My name is Matt Tatro. I cover the Midwest for Radiant Logic. Also have started the Chicagoland and Identity and Access Management User Group. And also have with me Dieter Schuler, who's seated but is prone to speak at any point, also with Radiant Logic as well. So thanks for taking the time. We're going to talk about the present state of identity and access management as we've learned from the organizations we're dealing with, the importance of identity, some of the major obstacles to key business initiatives, and then how you get it under control. Talk to you a little bit about a case study and give you some recommendations on what to do when you get back to the office. So, in general, we are seeing a lot of organizations trying to get to the cloud, and there was obviously great interest in this. At this point, this is a lot of the projects we get brought in on. Forrester did some research, CIO poll talking about what are the most important things about getting to the cloud. Obviously, security is a huge concern, and within security, most do recognize that identity and access management is very key to effective security. And obviously, it's not hard to acknowledge the importance of that, but most organizations do not have a strong identity and access management program. What we're seeing is that 20% of enterprises still have no formal identity and access management program. 30% have achieved a mature program at this point, but that leaves a lot that are still working to get to an optimal identity program. And if you're not there, it's costing you money. It's basically, the research shows from Gartner that the folks that are not in the optimal identity program right now are costing themselves about 25% in operational costs. So there's a great importance, and there's a lot of learnings we've had about why folks are not getting the most out of that investment. We'll talk a little bit about that. This is nothing new, but just to give you a sense for the types of projects we get involved with, the world of access has been expanding, and you know that every time something moves along one of these axes, if you start in the center, when it was just enterprise or just employees accessing enterprise computers with enterprise applications, life was easier. Life was simpler, if not easier. But as you move along the axes for all those different channels, you get on-premise applications going all the way out to the cloud. You're dealing with user populations from employees all the way out to customers and patients for healthcare organizations. You get channels of access all the way out to personal devices and bring your own device, which I'll touch on in a minute. All of these can create projects around your identity and access management team, which if you're not ready for, then it's going to cause a lot of heartache, lead to a lot of negative perception in your identity teams, and get you to where there's nothing sustainable within your identity strategy. So what we see is that we see this. PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study on it, talking about identities being fragmented and siloed. So there's typically a huge number of directories and databases out there with identity that are built for reasons I'll touch on in the next slide. But the average enterprise has 68 internal and 12 external account directories. Most have overlap when you're talking about internal users, and a slight amount, probably it says 38% of external users are, if an organization is dealing with external constituents, they exist across many sources within their organization. So that causes an issue around, do you know that this person in the first directory is the same person as the next one, and vice versa as far as the database world as well. So if you're not able to do that, that can cause some problems. There's inefficiency created around account provisioning and deprovisioning at this point. User management consumes about 34% of the total identity and access management workload. The user accounts are usually created in a lot of different systems, 16 by PwC research. The rest are manual and maintained in silos. So there's not a lot of cohesion as far as the identity practice in general. With an impact on user productivity here, you see that on average, IT is managing up to 73 unique applications that require user access. And just by implementing a single sign-on program, it's a good first step, reduces about 16 minutes a day for logins and increases productivity. What does the world look like in the traditional sense? What we typically see as far as identity management programs that are not mature, and this is, as we touched on before, mostly the case. Each time a new application is stood up, it comes with the necessary requirement of standing up a new data source, whether that's a directory, a database, web service, whatever the case may be. That act of creating a new data source comes with some type of either provisioning process, synchronization process, oftentimes a manual re-architecting process of an existing directory or standing up a totally new directory. So there's costs not only in licensing, but time, energy, and things like that that lead to the perception of identity as a bottleneck. This is a situation, where you get to the point where you're having to manage all these different links, and it becomes a question of how many bridges can you build. Why would you continue this business of all the different work around identity? So there's so much of, this is so much of a popular approach and so much of an issue for organizations that when Gartner did a study in 2013, the conclusion from one of their analysts was that they needed to kill identity in order to save it. So one of the main conclusions being that identity is apart from the business and not a part of the business. We'll come back to that in a second, but we certainly have some feelings on that presentation there. But we think it really struck a chord and got some folks to look at identity a lot more clearly. So we're talking about connection to the business. That's what all IT, should strive for, is a good connection to the business. What I like to do in a first meeting with any organization is ask them point blank, at what point in your process, any type of new business process, is the business engaging you as an identity team or an IT security team? Sometimes you're completely bypassed. A lot of times, there's a recent study done where they're asking IT personnel how many cloud apps exist in your organization, guess being about 40 to 50 on average. Sometimes you can see organizations that have close to 400 cloud apps in use, across the entire large organization. And most of those are not enterprise ready. So are you being bypassed as a practice in terms of identity? Are they just is the business just doing their own thing without talking to the security or identity team? Are you a bottleneck? We work with an organization that basically we got to the point where they had looked at our solution for many different reasons, but the big business driver was that they bought what they considered a game-changing application. This application was a corporate YouTube type program where they're going to be able to redo all of their different HR policies. They're going to be able to revolutionize how the company communicated. But when it came time after a purchase of this to deploy it, and they needed the help of the identity team, they didn't have the necessary groups in their infrastructure to deploy. So you've now got a multi-million-dollar piece of shelfware, which, there was arguments about who should be resolving this, but you become quickly a bottleneck if the business is not connected with you. Or we have organizations that have deployed a best-of-breed stack of identity solutions that enable them to go out and proactively look for the business units that are looking at projects and saying, you need to be engaged with us earlier because you'll get to market faster and at less cost. So that's a powerful thing for any organization, any IT organization, let alone identity and access management, to be able to go around and say to the business that work with us, we're a business enabler. Back to this Gartner report from last year on killing identity management. We definitely agree that identity is apart from and not a part of the business in general. Most of the organizations we start engagements with are in that ballpark. But where we disagree is that a complete revolution is necessary. What we think instead is that you can evolve and leverage what you already own. And the way to do that, back to our picture of the very messy identity infrastructure, is to get yourself to where you're in one spot. Get yourself an abstraction layer for authentication and authorization. Go to where all the different directories and databases within the organization, every identity repository is now abstracted and leveraged in one spot. So in this one spot, you've got a complete list of all users. You've done correlation and disambiguation to say that the same user exists across many sources, and then maybe some similar identifiers are not the same person. So we know each person's uniquely listed once in the federated identity service layer. from there, you can leverage all of the different attributes about the person that exist in all the different sources. So when you build this, you've got a complete profile of all known users so that there is a lot more control that you never had before as an identity team. So now you've got the ability to suck in any schema that you need from any source, manually re-architect that from a standpoint of what does the application need, and I'll deliver it. It just becomes more of a world where you can enable whatever the business is requiring versus having your rigid structure that any new business initiative must fit in. So some of the big business drivers that we're dealing with, I touched on the cloud, but creating these federation relationships has become something that has exposed a lot of the weaknesses within folks' existing identity infrastructures. So if you're not able to give a clean look of identity to any partners out there for purposes of a federation relationship, then it's going to cost time in terms of a project to get you there. That's a big one. Once you get to this unified view and you have different, very small use repositories, single-use repositories out there, you can start to retire some of these different legacy infrastructures. So that's been a big driver of just cleaning up the existing directory infrastructure and saying, let me get down to just one common hub. There's been a lot of organizations transitioning from a stack vendor approach, which locks you into a group of applications that will it can only work with with that particular infrastructure, to a best of breed approach to give you a lot more flexibility, give you much more of a flexible architecture that is extensible for the whole organization. You also have organizations looking at increasing the performance of a legacy identity repository. I love coming to cutting edge IT conferences and things like that and talking about RACF, talking about mainframe, because it still exists in a lot of organizations. But you can put an LDAP interface on top of that, give it performance that it never had before. There's a lot of organizations that are in that boat for authentication and authorization. So new applications with specific requirements, not necessarily the cloud, but if you're bringing in a new app that's web-based or whatever the case may be that has requirements that you can't meet as an identity team, then you're going to have that similar type of project. Mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures are also a big business driver that we're seeing, where if you are under the pressure of having to get to that merged company or that split company by a certain date, then it can be tough to get that project all ramped up, and you can get there much faster if you have the flexibility that you have with a federated identity service to get you there up and running in days, where it takes months and sometimes years to accomplish that. One case study that we'll share talks about organization Intel that was in this predicament of the traditional identity management approach. You have all the different legacy repositories that changed to this type of approach, the federated identity service approach. Complete game changer for them, delivering now in days what used to take months. And what was simple for them was to say, all right, here's last year's worth of projects that the business brought to us, and here's the time we know we spent trying to get all these applications off the ground from an identity standpoint. Well, in a proof of concept, in a week, we built views to do all of this in a couple of days. It was taking us months. So the expected return on investment for that was pretty high. And then they actually projected out about $250,000. The actual return in the first 2 years was over close to $1.5 million. So the first year of operation for the Federated Identity Service paid for itself 3 times over and helped them lower their costs by 73%. So giving yourself a common abstraction layer for authentication and authorization that allows you to leverage those existing investments was key. And key for them, key for a lot of the organizations we're dealing with right now. As far as next steps, what can you do in terms of when you get back to the office? How do you even begin to get your mind around identity and access management? Well, the first thing to do is make a list of your sources of identity. Look at also your sources of provisioning input. Organizations that have grown from mergers and acquisitions often have many of those. So there's often a problem of getting identity data that's not accurate for one source going to many different sources. So you have a issue of bad data being passed around or inaccurate data if someone's coming from a couple different spots. So get a handle on your sources of identity, your directories, your databases, your web services, all your application-specific silos, and then your provisioning inputs. Think about where your attributes exist. There's a lot that can be leveraged based on what attributes exist out there, and find out which sources are authoritative for specific attributes. Think about your ability to correlate or disambiguate users, which is pretty simple if you have a common identifier like an employee ID or some type of customer account number or something like that. If you've replicated that across sources, you have something that you can connect with to say this person is the same across sources. So that will work for you. But if your data is not clean, you have to be honest and say, okay, we know that X number of people exist here and here. We don't know who is who compared to the two sources. We think they're both customer sets of identity, things like that. That can be a problem. Think about what applications need identity, what types of protocols, schemas, structures, and data is necessary to get the proper authentication and authorization for organizations. Those are things that if you don't have the flexibility, it'll cost you a lot in terms of the time to market for a lot of these projects. And beyond single sign-on, what do the apps need? Is there an account for the user in every system? And then just an honest evaluation of where you're at in connection with the business. Do you have a sense for the projects coming up and the type of impact that's going to have on your existing identity infrastructure? Is it going to be something that you recognize up front could be a many months effort to get up and running based on what you have? And can you do it faster leveraging a service like this?